So let's start with the Olympics. Canada's medal count just keeps growing, and the Toronto Star's editorial board is arguing that athletes deserve to be paid more. They say the Olympics bring in billions, and the IOC spends only 4% of its revenue on athletes. So should athletes be making more for participation in the Olympics?
Well, I can weigh in on this. I mean, I find that almost insulting, that 4%. I'm so out of shape. If I ran a 5K right now, I would expect some kind of pay, chocolate, beer. We're in cottage country right now. I was swimming in a lake. And when I got out of the lake, I was like, where are the flowers? Someone should be celebrating this.
Where's your medal?
Why not?
Come on.
Yeah, my medal. And if I think I deserve a medal, how can I not apply that same logic to these incredible elite athletes who've devoted so much and sacrificed so much for their sport? So absolutely, they should be paid more.
Well, Ali, if I ran that 5K, I'd need defibrillators, not roses. So, but this has been talked about. The NCAA is talking about this. Should the bodies making the money, earning the money, be actually getting the money? You know, it reminds me of Chris Rock's great joke when he talked about the difference between wealth and richness. And he said, Shaquille O'Neal, he's rich. The white guy that signs his paycheck, he's wealthy. And that has been a discussion in the Olympics, for years and years. It was back in 1988 when they finally let professional athletes play in the Olympics. But during the Cold War, there was all this discourse around in the communist countries, they were being paid for jobs as landscapers, but they were actually being paid to be athletes, while our athletes weren't being paid. If I think back to my Olympic hero, Jim Thorpe, who was arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, the first Indigenous man to receive gold medals for the USA, he competed in track and field, won a big bag full of medals. Then somebody outed the fact that he had been in semi-pro baseball, and they stripped him of all his medals. He went on to play professional baseball, professional basketball, and after his death, they gave his medals back to his kids. But, to me, if you are the one earning the money, right, your body is what's putting the bums in the seats, then you should get some of that money. Those people at the top, white knuckling that cash, they got to let it go.
So where should the money come from? Where should the money come from?
Ticket sales, some from the IOC.
Well, it seems reasonable, right? Like this is a compelling argument they're making, because they say just 4% of this annual revenue is going to athletes for scholarships and grants and awards, and they compared that to professional leagues that give around 50% of the revenues back to athletes. So it seems reasonable that the IOC could spend less on promoting itself and put more money into the pockets, as you said, Candy, of the people putting on the show. But guys, the IOC is a business, like a big business. Show me a big business that splits the profits fairly. I don't know if this is ever going to happen.
It's supposedly a nonprofit. It's supposedly a nonprofit. It's registered as a nonprofit.
Yeah, but sure. Okay, sure. But even that editorial, even the Toronto Star editorial sort of was like, wah, wah.
Yes, I agree. But we can roll that, but that's their official status.
My whole thing is, aren't athletes needing the money before they get to the Olympics? I think that's the biggest question I have. It's one thing to get to the Olympics, but we all know that these athletes are training for years and years and years, in some cases decades, to be able to even qualify for the Olympics. So I feel like, there might be a discussion that the IOC might be on the hook for a little bit, but I actually have to pivot and say, where are the governments and what are the requirements that the IOC is asking of participating countries in terms of their support? Because these athletes, the majority of them, at least according to one statistic I found, over 60% of athletes who are applying for various grants and funds and scholarships, 62% of them are what they have in the net income bracket, negative net income bracket. In other words, these are people who are kind of like the working poor who can't afford their basic training, are working all these other jobs just to be able to even qualify. So my thing is, we should be looking at how the countries, maybe how Canada is supporting athletes well before they're even getting to the IOC level.
But you might be letting the rich people off the hook there, Melissa. I think absolutely governments play a role in this. But I'm just reminded of the Amazon format where it's like, the working poor, and the athletes at 4%, they're effectively the working poor here. And Candy, I don't know if this is what you were going to say, but I obviously think about stand-up.
Yes.
And, I don't know if you have the same philosophy I do, but my perspective is if I'm doing a show and no one's getting paid, meaning the producer, the promoter, nobody's getting paid, it's all going to charity, I am fine with that. But as soon as someone is getting paid, we all better get paid. That's the way I look at it.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
And
but
if you're
then who gets
going to
what?
put my name, if you're going to put my name on the ticket and charge a price for that ticket, then I better be getting paid. And exactly, if the guy bringing craft services in and the guy bringing the lightings in is getting paid, then as the talent, I want my paycheck at the end of that night. I don't work for free.
But then, okay, so let's get to brass tacks. If the IOC is going to be on the hook to pay some athletes, who deserves what? Do you have to be a certain ranking, like maybe, I don't know, world top 20? What about for the dark horse that people don't see coming and then all of a sudden starts winning all these medals? So how do you start to determine what athletes get what payment? Does everybody get the same? Do you start to rank it?
You bring up a good point. Like, there are a lot of people who believe that athletes should medaling athletes should be paid, right? Like right now, there's no prize money for medaling. And, there's an argument for and against.
Not from the
I
IOC,
understand
but
what
Canada pays our athletes.
Right, no, but the IOC doesn't pay for athletes who win medals. And so some people are wondering whether or not that's an option. And again, there are downsides and upsides to everything. The bottom line, though, is you bring up a good point, Mel. How does the payment scale be? Like, how do you execute it if you're the IOC? Putting that aside, given that is a complicated conversation, we do know that the IOC, even though it's a nonprofit organization, has so much money and also is not giving enough money to athletes and also restricting athletes with what money they can make independent of what the IOC gives them. So there are all kinds of brand sponsorship restrictions on athletes who compete in the Olympics imposed by the IOC. For example, if you are lucky enough to be a sponsored athlete, you can only make 7 thank yous, personal thank yous to your sponsors. And those thank yous are very, very meticulously set out in terms of you can't use the logo. You can't call yourself an Olympian. You can only call yourself a champion. You can't do this. You can't do that because the IOC says, and this is the joke, the IOC says they don't want to over-commercialize the Olympics. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm watching every Olympic event and I'm seeing logos all over the place. Like this is what's maddening.
Who would never touch a hamburger, shove a hamburger in their mouth. Saying, I'm loving it.
This is what's maddening. Like, I get it, Mel. Maybe it's like not the IOC's entire responsibility to like fund the athletes, but at least start restricting and loosening all these protocols and not stop athletes from going to get their money where they can get it.
And Lainey, just jumping on what you're saying,
they got there though. But they got there. My only thing is that it doesn't have to be like, I get what you're saying, that it's really important for an athlete to thank their sponsors. But the point is they got there and they didn't have to waitress on the weekends to get to the Olympics if they potentially have, if they're one of the very few lucky ones that have those big sponsorships. And so many athletes have had to turn to things like monetizing their social media accounts just to be able to pay for their nutrition, their supplements, their coaching.
Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if the government should be held accountable for everyone pursuing our dreams. Like, we waitress, we work jobs, we work retail.
No, but
how about here's the analogy? How about here's the analogy, right? Like, there are certain sports that don't have leagues. And the only time people in these sports can shine is every 4 years in the Olympics. So the analogy, to me, Mel, would be it's like schooling and education. You'll waitress and you'll hustle and you'll pump gas and whatever throughout school to supplement your education and your training. For the goal of getting a job with a bank or a corporation or whatever, where they pay you the big bucks. The bank, in this case, where you get your job, is the Olympics. The problem is the Olympics don't write the check after you put yourself through school.
But let me just take that analogy one little bit further. Let me just say this. Instead of it being the job, the bank, the IOC can be a university. So I starved to death through law school, 3 years, but at the end, when at graduation, I make awards. I get awards for highest standing in something, or I get awards for something. There are money prizes attached to those awards. So I am rewarded for my 3 years of work. And once you start rewarding, yes, it's hard for the starting athletes, but eventually everybody will catch up and be on the money train, except for those big guys at the top.
Oh, gosh. Let's put a pin in this because, there's another question, like, are athletes competing for money now and not awards? That's a whole other discussion. We blew the whole first segment on this. That is how compelling everybody's thoughts are. I love this.